Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Courtney Nelson, president of City Club. For over 100 years, City Club of Portland is where civic-minded people come together to make Portland and Oregon a better place for everyone to live, work, and explore. We're gathered here at the Sentinel Hotel, along with all of you listening on OPB Radio or viewing on OpenSignal or YouTube. The generous support of City Club's corporate and media partners enables us to put on the state's best civic programs week after week. Our media partner is Oregon Business Magazine, and our current Friday Forum sponsors are Family Care Health, Northwest Health Foundation, and Northwest Natural. Please join me in showing appreciation for our sponsors. And now on to our program. Depending on who you ask, Prosper Portland, formerly known as the Portland Development Commission, is either the city's economic development engine or the source of all of our gentrification woes. Big description. Today we'll hear more about that dynamic from Kimberly Branam, Prosper Portland's new executive director. She was appointed as executive director in August 2016. Immediately prior to that, she served for 5 years as Prosper Portland's deputy director and for 4 years as the Senior Economic Development Policy Advisor in Mayor Sam Adams' office. She holds a Master in Public Policy from Harvard University and is a Grant High School graduate. Interviewing her today will be Stephen Green, the City Manager for Town Squared, an online network for local business owners. Stephen holds many roles in our community, including founder of Pitch Black PDX, a member of the Housing Bond Oversight Committee, and a former board member of Black United Fund of Oregon, the Housing Development Center, and the Oregon Microenterprise Network. He's also a former colleague of Kimberly's at Portland Prosper. Please join me in welcoming our guests today.
So I'd like to start by thanking Kimberly for being here and being open to answering these questions and helping our members know more about what Prosper Portland is doing and is going to be doing in the future. So let's go right into it, shall we? So the first question I'll give you is Prosper Portland recently spent $200,000 to rebrand, including a website. Why was this such a priority in your first 6 months as executive director?
Great question. Well, so first of all, I do want to just underscore and also thank you, Stephen, and thank the City Club for this forum. Particularly in today's political climate, it's really refreshing to be able to have such a venue in order to be able to have these kinds of conversations. So on to the rebrand. So when I thought about becoming the executive director, I thought about what were some of the major challenges. And one of the things that I've experienced in my time here in the roles with Prosper Portland and with Mayor Adams is that there's a real both distrust of PDC and there's also a lack of understanding. There has historically been a lack of understanding of what we do. And so we engaged early after I was selected to be the executive director, engaged with my board some communications consultants with the goal of helping us think about how we engage with the community, how we talk to the community, and how we better really do this work in collaboration. And so the scope of the investment was both for the rebrand, but it was in fact moreover for a new communications and engagement strategy. And through that work, we had great consultants. So we worked with DHM. Sue Embry did our polling. Lee Weinstein and Brink Communications did work with us. And they helped talk to hundreds of Portlanders who gave us a pretty clear-eyed perspective of what their priorities were for their city's economic development agency. They told us that they wished that PDC was more transparent, that they appreciated our convening role, that they thought that business growth and job growth was the most important thing that we could do. And our communications consultants told us that in order to really effectively be able to talk about what we're doing and to connect with the community, we needed to change our name. And so that's what we did. And so we It started even earlier than that with a new strategic plan, which we'll talk about later, that has its objective to build an equitable economy. And so the brand and the way that we talk and the way that we show up is all around building an equitable economy. So that's why we did it. And the reason that I selected to do this and why I think the board and I felt like it was such a priority today is because we are now in our third year in this new strategic plan. And in order to be fully effective and really seek to build an equitable economy with our partners, we need to change the way that we show up and we need to change the way that we talk about ourselves.
Thank you. You were the deputy director at PDC for about 5 years before becoming the executive director. In your new role as the executive director, what are some of the things you're going to stop doing, start doing, and continue doing at Prosper?
So we're really guided by the strategic plan that we have, and we adopted that in 2015. And that helps us to prioritize our investments, prioritize our staff time. So as I mentioned, the goal there is to create widely shared prosperity. It's an audacious goal, it's a bold goal. The board is behind it, city council is behind it. It was a plan that we put together with partners. And in order to do that, we basically identified 5 areas that we needed to focus in. So the first was to create healthy, connected neighborhoods across Portland. And the idea there is that those neighborhoods that have a lot of amenities, a lot of transportation access, we need to make sure that those continue to be places that people can live and that small businesses can work in. And so our investments there really need to focus on creating access. There are other places in Portland that don't yet have the kinds of amenities or access to employment. And so in those places in East Portland and others, we really need to focus on increasing connectivity, increasing employment. So that's a focus of ours. We will continue to make investments in Lentz and Gateway, in commercial affordability in Central East Side, for example. That continues to be a priority. The second area of focus is on growing employment, growing jobs. So with our new strategic plan, we focused on 5 clusters, and we did that with an eye towards middle income employment. So one of the things that I think people are well aware of is that there's really this bifurcation in the economy today. So you have significant job growth in low skills, low wage employment opportunities. We've seen about 18% growth in the metro region. Then you have this hollowing out of the middle class, and so these are the kinds of jobs that have traditionally been the way you get into the middle class. Construction, manufacturing, things that have a lower barrier to entry, but still are family wage employment opportunities. Within that area, we've only seen about a 3% growth in employment. And then you have a lot of growth in the high-tech space in high-wage opportunities, about 13% growth. So we looked at industries that had quality employment opportunities, and that were both middle income and high wage opportunities. So we're working with businesses within these industry sectors to help them grow, to help diversify the tech industry, to help diversify the athletic and outdoor industry, but also to make sure that we continue to have a strong manufacturing base, that we have a healthcare sector that is quite that is accessible. So those are things that we're doing. And then finally, I'll just mention that we really have retooled our work to support small businesses. So Prosper Portland is the largest investor in small business technical assistance in the city. We have been a steward of city general fund resources as well as some federal funds in order to do that. We've traditionally had a focus on small businesses and providing those support. And then we've also worked with high growth entrepreneurs, and that's something that Stephen has done with Pitch Black, for example, to support those businesses that are really ready to scale. Within that work, we've identified that because of the enormous disparities in wealth between people of color and between white folks, that we really need to focus and redouble our efforts in wealth creation, in asset building, with a very specific focus on supporting people of color, business owners of color, and women within the tech space. And so when we think about our priorities, they all fall within those areas of focus. So we are spending our resources in a way that tries to make progress on that and that really leverages other folks' resources.
Can you expand a little bit on, from your first 5 years there, what are some things that PDC, Prosper Portland, is not going to be doing? What are some things that you learned doing the last strategic plan that, man, those things just don't work, or they don't have the ROI that we were looking for? What are some things that are concrete that Prosper just is not going to do anymore?
So I think that really the change is in how we do it. So I think you could say we're not going to do it the way that we used to do it, but the tools remain the same, right? So we are still going to be the city's economic development agency. We're still going to be working in a really deep way with business and industry. We're still going to support small businesses. We're still going to make sure that there are development opportunities that meet community desired needs. I think the fundamental difference is how we do it, right? So how do we make sure that every project, every initiative, every program begins with the question, who will benefit from this investment? And how do we make sure that equity is first and foremost within that, not just in terms of the outcome, but also in the process? And so you'll see in projects like the Broadway corridor planning process right now, which is where the post office is, that we are really taking a different approach to creating a new neighborhood in that area. Whereas previously, we would have had a steering committee that probably looked at the adjacent neighborhoods, so Old Town Chinatown and the Pearl District. We've created a 40-person steering committee that really represents the entire city, because we acknowledge that this is a regional asset. This is a neighborhood that needs to benefit people who live east of 122nd. This is a neighborhood that will need to benefit people of color, and so their voices matter at the decision table really early on. So, we could say we're not going to do development in the old way, and I think that that's accurate. But I guess I just would shape it a little bit differently and say we're trying to be as intentional as possible from the beginning about how we do our work.
For those of you listening on OPB, this is City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Stephen Green, City Manager at Town Squared. I'm here with Executive Director Kimberly Branam. It says Governor Kimberly Branam. Executive Director at Prosper Portland. We're talking about development in Portland, gentrification, and what it means to build community. So next question. Prosper Portland created the Tech Pledge a few years ago to help people of color mainly get jobs in the tech industry. At the very same time, about a year ago, Prosper Portland had 0 people of color in management roles of any kind. What strides is Prosper Portland taking to better walk its talk?
So appreciate that question. So change starts at an organizational level, and it starts from the inside. And so we take seriously, and one of the things that I've prioritized as executive director is really ensuring that we have a management team and a leadership team that reflects the diversity of our city. And so we have, my first hire was to hire Serilda Summers-McGee as my HR director. She's really a regional expert in diversifying your organization, as well as just a phenomenal HR leader. And she helped to refashion our entire hiring process. So she did things like, just the way that we publicized, the way that we did outreach, but also the hiring process became much more transparent and inclusive of staff, of community members. And I'm pleased that as a result of that, we have a much more diverse executive leadership team. And I think that there is there's no secret that people want to come to a place where they feel welcome. People want to come to a place where they feel like their voices will be heard. PDC, Prosper Portland, has not been known necessarily as that. And so that kind of culture change, and starting with how do you actually make an organization where all voices, particularly voices of people of color, particularly voices of people who are not, white men, how how do you do that? And that comes from just culture change. And I think everybody knows culture change is hard work. You have to show up and you have to want to do it every day. It takes leadership. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, but I think we're making progress on that.
Thank you. So over the years, I think people have learned phrases like the TIF cliff, urban renewal finance, and as you transition to doing more work citywide, how can you help members here understand more about that essentially 90% of your resources come from a tool that can only be used in 15% of the city? And so how do you plan to fund in perpetuity the work that's so important now?
So under my predecessor, Patrick Quinton, in close collaboration with our board, we began a process of creating a financial sustainability plan. We call it our long-term business plan. And the idea there was basically that we have this really important strategic plan and important objective of creating widely shared prosperity. And we believe that this objective is something that needs to continue to be front and center. We hear that from community members. We hear that from city council. But as you mentioned, we have a precipitous decline in tax increment finance resources, which are those resources available in urban renewal areas across the city. And so in 7 years from now, when those resources are basically not available to us, what do we do? And so the plan that Patrick drafted with our board effectively said that we should follow a roadmap with the following objectives, or the following components. The first is, Prosper Portland still has nearly $400 million of public resources to invest. Now, those are largely in the urban renewal areas, but that's a significant amount of resource. We need to make sure that we optimize the public benefit as well as be smart about what the financial return of that should be. So in looking at the $400 million, if we were to give away we could basically afford to give away about 20% through grants and infrastructure. We can invest about 50% of those resources in projects like the ones we did in Lentz, where we are creating significant public benefits, but also anticipate that those loans will be repaid. And then about 30% of those resources need to go for market rate returns. And if we do that, if we get 6% returns on investments like a portion of the post office redevelopment, that can help subsidize and create a long-term revenue stream that can be reinvested in places like Rosewood and other parts of the city outside of the urban renewal areas. So that's a big portion of it. We also will be having conversations with City Council and other partners about how we can identify additional operating resources. We know that we need to diversify our revenue streams, and so we will be going after those resources as well.
I spoke with another local economist, and she estimated that more than $700 million in future wealth has been stripped from the Black community in Albina. What role do you see Prosper Portland playing in supporting and creating wealth in specifically Portland's historic Black community?
Well, you know, the damage done by PDC's investments in North and Northeast Portland, and by the Federal Highway administration deciding to go through that neighborhood, by the Coliseum, those are things that the public sector has enormous responsibility for. And so, I believe deeply that we have to be transparent about the harm that we created, and then think about what lessons we've learned from that and what we can do. So we have been given the resources that we have in front of us. So we have, over the last year, been working on a process with a number of community leaders to think about the remaining resources that we do have in the interstate urban renewal area. And Stephen, you were part of that group. And so as a part of that, the thing that came front and center that we heard from the hundreds of community members who came and participated was that asset building and wealth creation was the most important thing that we could do. And so of the $32 million that Prosper Portland has to invest in North and Northeast Portland, we have a very very specific outcomes in terms of supporting entrepreneurs of color, specifically African American entrepreneurs and property owners in those areas, to make sure that their businesses are thriving, that if they have properties, that we can support them in delivering on their aspirations. And in addition, we have priorities around nonprofits and a cultural business hub. That isn't sufficient, right? And that doesn't make up for the harm that was caused, but it certainly is what we need to be doing with those remaining resources. We've also been partnering with the Portland Housing Bureau, who now does all of the city's affordable housing investments. So that used to be a function that PDC played before 2009, when the Portland Housing Bureau was created, and so all of the affordable housing resources went over to the Portland Housing Bureau. They have 70% of the resources in the interstate urban renewal area, and they are being very clear in terms of having a preference policy, wanting to make sure that those people who were displaced have preference to come back. And so, so that's what I think we want to do in North and Northeast Portland. But there's a larger conversation to be had about how are we supporting African American entrepreneurs, African American community across our city. We have great partners who are working to support African American children in East Portland. We need to be working with them as well. And so I think, it doesn't start and end in Northeast Portland. It needs to be a more holistic conversation about entrepreneurs and families across the city. Prosper Portland has some of those tools, but we don't have the complete package.
So let's say everyone here buys into the new Prosper Portland brand, and we understand what prosperity means. What are the things we're going to see happening 3 months from now, 6 months from now, that folks can point to and say, oh, they're on the right track. They've got it down. They're moving. The train's moving forward, and these are the good things that we wanted to see happen.
Well, let's see. In the next 3 months in Lentz Town Center, I think you'll see some projects coming out of the ground. So we have 4 projects that I think really reflect our priorities in Lentz Town Center, and they are both. There's a significant portion of them that has affordable housing in it. So we believe that even though right now Lentz is a fairly affordable neighborhood, that they will be probably facing gentrification pressures within the not too distant future. And so we began with our investments in having a partnership with the Portland Housing Bureau and investing in affordable housing. We also have some affordable commercial space, so local businesses and businesses owned by people of color will have the ability to maintain their presence in Lentz Town Center and even come into that. So that's something that people will be able to point to and is a visible embodiment of our direction. We just recently, this week, announced that we have a new cohort of our Small Business Technical Assistance Partnership Program. So these are 11 nonprofit technical assistance providers who support businesses, and the goal is that by 2020 they will have supported 1,000 businesses, majority owned by people of color, people across the entire city. So our hope for that is that we have 1,000 businesses that are stabilized and strong, that we have 250 businesses that are meeting significant growth objectives, that we have 100 businesses that are ready to enter into new markets. And so you'll hopefully be able to see and experience that there are stronger businesses across the entire city. I think there are a number of ways in which we invest public resources, and it literally always happens through partnerships. And so there are probably things where, Prosper Portland had a role in that, or supporting that business. It's more important to us ultimately that the business is strong than that we get credit for it. But we are trying to publicize on our website and have more stories that are available that tell the story of how through partners and through our investments we are making a difference. So those are just a couple of the ways that I think you should hopefully see the impact.
What are some things that Prosper Portland can do to slow down gentrification, stop gentrification? Is that even possible?
So I think that there are some important things that we can do. I think that there are things that we can do just as a city. So I'll talk about we, and by that I mean Prosper Portland in partnership with the Portland Housing Bureau and City Council. So, you know, if you look at gentrification, gentrification is this highly visible, very concrete manifestation of underlying inequities. You have racist policies, but you also have just fundamental economic inequity, and it shows up in these very concentrated ways. And so, you know, we need to acknowledge, first and foremost, that we need to take a look at all of the policies, all of the, you know, all of what we're doing with a race, with the racial lens, particularly because the history and the susceptibility of communities of color to gentrification has its roots in redlining, which was a federal policy that was allowed through FHA, right? So these are not things that happened without public involvement. These were the groundwork was set through public policies. So what can we do today? We can make sure that there is as much development as possible. And it has to be appropriate, and I'm not saying that, you know, we should have high rises everywhere, but it is the case that we need to grow in order to be able to absorb and have enough space for the people who are coming in. We know that there are about 111 people who come into our city and who are moving into our city. That's not going to stop. We need to have enough housing for them. At the same time, the fact that we have the new inclusionary housing zoning really gives us a good tool in order to ensure that there is permanent affordable housing. And so the Housing Bureau obviously has done a tremendous amount of work to pass a new housing bond and to make sure that we have subsidized housing that gives people an opportunity to be, you know, to remain in their neighborhoods and to continue to have a mixed income city. We also need to acknowledge that we have an economy that is fundamentally changing. So I think I mentioned earlier that you have growth in the high-tech, or, you know, high-wage industries and low-wage industries. The knowledge economy isn't going away. And so in order to, I was just looking at something that said that in the last 10 years, high school, those folks in Portland who have a high school degree have actually lost 10% of their income. Those folks who have a bachelor's degree have lost about 5% of their income. Those people with a graduate degree have seen a 7.5% increase. So that says to me that we need to, as a public sector, as a private sector, really redouble our focus on education, making sure that people have the skills that they need to be competitive, that we're doing so in a way in which particularly our children of color have, you know, great education and then have access to the networks, and where you have private sector employers like those that you mentioned in the Tech Diversity Pledge who are committed to diversifying, that they take that leadership position. So I think those are some ways in which we need to act. And then the other thing about gentrification is that, you know, gentrification can benefit people who are homeowners. Right, rising prices can have a, you know, can have a financial benefit to people who have ownership. And so, one of the things that we need to do as an organization is to really focus on building assets. We've focused for a long time on job creation. That's still important. Income is still important, but we really need to also focus on making sure that people have homes, properties that they own, that they have, you know, individual development accounts so that they can purchase homes, own their business, and benefit from the economic expansion that we're seeing.
Perfect. For those of you listening on OPB, this is the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Stephen Green, City Manager at Town Squared. I'm here with Executive Director Kimberly Branam of Prosper Portland. We're talking about Portland, gentrification, and growing our city's rising economy. Next question. We've got an audience of very civically minded people. They want to be engaged, they want to learn, they want to participate. What role can Portlanders play in being engaged in your work and being hands-on and not just having keyboard courage every time something comes out in the newspaper?
That's a great question. So I would start with, I want to start by talking about the 6 neighborhood prosperity initiative districts and the 2 main streets that we have started and are working with. So Stephen, as you well know, we created 6 micro-urban renewal areas with the idea of really trying to support community-led, community-based economic development in some of those places in Portland that hadn't seen investments. And so in 2011, we created 6 micro-urban renewal areas in what are now the Jade District, Division Midway Alliance, the Rosewood Initiative, the Kollek Boulevard Alliance, R42nd, and Park Rose. We also have supported main streets in St. John's and Alberta. Those 8 districts are working together, and they each have a district manager. And those districts determine what's the vision for the area that they have, and how do they want to invest their resources. And they need people like you who are engaged and invested to show up and to tell them what matters to you, because this is really a community-led, community-driven initiative. And so if you are in any of these areas, or if you care, if you want to support the businesses, it's a great way to connect to your area and you know, fundraise, right? Help to either financially or just by volunteer hours, by supporting your local businesses to really support that work. There are other things that we do, of course, through community engagement, and you can find out all about that on our website in terms of how to show up and engage. But I guess, you know, I think fundamentally we can really help our economy and build a more equitable economy in our hiring decisions, in our purchasing decisions, and in how we engage.
So Portland is a small business town. 83% of businesses here have less than 10 employees. At the same time, we are the only one of the 50 largest cities that doesn't have an Office of Small Business or a Center for Entrepreneurship. So there's physically no public space to go if you are a small business owner or someone thinking about starting a business. There's nowhere for them to physically go. What role do you see Prosper Portland playing in a more direct role in continuing to make sure that people that have great ideas can go and take what they're passionate about and turn it into a business?
So, you know, we did, when Mayor Adams was mayor, we did think about having kind of a virtual one-stop place for people who had small businesses or who were thinking about having small businesses. And Prosper Portland hosted that. And the most interesting takeaway for that was that there weren't a lot of people who accessed it. And it was one of these things where, it's, you know, the New York's equivalent has an office, and there's a lot of energy around it. And so we kind of thought, like, why aren't people using this? And our hypothesis was, fundamentally, people want to have physical interaction. They want to have a relationship. They want either mentorship, or they want to sit down and talk to somebody when they're thinking about doing something as bold and exciting as starting a business or expanding their business. And so, you know, the idea of having one center, I think, is a compelling idea. The alternative that we've supported through the Small Business Technical Assistance Partnership is that you have a number of different places where you can access and where you can be supported. So through the 11 partners, so I'm going to forget somebody, but through MISO, the Hispanic Chamber, NEA, PSU's Business Accelerator, PI and TIE and Accelerate Oregon, the hope is that somehow you, as an interested business, will be able to connect to one of these providers. Maybe it feels like it's the closest to you, or maybe it's the most culturally relevant, or maybe it has the most expertise in your particular need, business finance or legal support. And so, you know, what we want to do is to publicize that we have these fantastic technical assistance providers, people who can help you think and how to navigate within the city, you know, city policies and red tape, but that there is somebody who's there to hold your hand and to support you when you're doing the important work of growing your business.
So I'm going to give you a magical legislative wand, and either from a city standpoint or a statewide standpoint, since urban renewal is governed by state statute, you had that wand. What do you do with it? What do you think helps Prosper Portland really move forward with its strategic plan?
That's such a great question. So if I had a magic wand, I would, this is kind of outside the scope. Okay, if I were queen for a day, I would support universal pre-K and universal kindergarten, and and I appreciate that that doesn't maybe sound like that's directly related to what we're doing, but it is, in the sense that in a knowledge-based economy, having kids who have great early starts from an educational standpoint is fundamental to the work that we do. What we do, hopefully, isn't so downstream, that it's too late. I believe that we make a significant impact, but fundamentally, having kids who are connected and supported is just incredibly important. If wearing my Prosper Portland hat, I would say, increasing access to capital and increasing resources that really can be put to support these fantastic businesses that we have, where there's a bit more risk tolerance, would be the other way that I would go.
You mentioned trust earlier. Talk about the journey for you and your leadership team to establish and build trust in communities all over Portland, especially in ones where the trust bucket may be close to empty.
Yeah, or deficit. Right. So this is a fundamental question, and this is an incredibly important question. So I appreciate the ability to talk about it. I think I mentioned earlier that in order for us to be able to do our work, in order for us to be able to think about building a more equitable economy, the leadership team, the management team, the board, staff really need to change how we work, how we engage with each other, how we engage with the community. We've been working with Crossroads, as you know, and they've supported us in thinking about this from an anti-racist institutional lens. And this is thinking about how do you really shift how you behave so that you're not perpetuating, unintentionally perhaps, you're not perpetuating the kind of inequities and lack of trust, right? And so they point to some of the ways that white institutions operate and what it takes in order to intervene. So white institutions, for example, are not sufficiently transparent. White institutions tend to have a very hierarchical structure, and efficiency is more important than effectiveness. So relationships become secondary in importance. And by the way, this isn't just Prosper Portland that deals with this. This is most institutions in the United States. So what we're trying to do, and we've been, had a lot of really hard conversations. We have great leaders who are helping to move this work forward within our organization, is to, on a daily basis, try to interrupt those tendencies that organizations have to keep things close to the vest until absolutely the last minute. So you'll see us trying to build trust and to build relationships by being as transparent as possible. Now, we acknowledge that because we do public-private partnerships and because we do development deals, there are things that we can't share, moment to moment. But our commitment to you is that when we can share it, that we will. And so transparency, I think, is a way of building trust. Making sure that we do prioritize relationships and that we prioritize effectiveness and taking the time that it takes to hear all voices and have voices make a difference is another way that I think you build trust. And so I think you'll see that happen, and that we are collectively as a leadership team taking the time to build those relationships. So I hope that you see us visibly in meetings, having one-on-one coffees, and just being there to build those relationships and put the time into that.
Perfect. All right, we're going to work your magic wand out one more time. driving down Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue right now, if you go to the cross street where Alberta is, there's a great development project happening there. Go back in time, how is Trader Joe's go down differently? What are your big learnings from that project that steer you forward from now?
Such a painful chapter in our organization's history, and painful, both from a staff level, and then I'm just going to digress for a moment to say, as a Portland native, I grew up in Northeast Portland. My grandparents on my mother's side actually owned a small insurance business right there where Natural Grocers is going to go, where the Trader Joe's site is. And so my family has deep roots within Northeast Portland. I went to Irvington Elementary School. I have seen that neighborhood change, and I have personally, just seen how painful that has been. So my orientation, my parents, my dad is an Episcopal priest with a real focus on social justice. My mother has worked to support immigrants and refugees, throughout her entire career. So our, breakfast and dinner table was always around how can we help make Portland more inclusive, better. So getting into, from a professional standpoint, a position in which my organization was at such crosshairs within a community that I have, loved and been a part of within Northeast Portland, was just personally difficult. Now, this of course isn't about me, but I'm just sharing that from a personal standpoint, it was really difficult. What we learned in the process, I believe, were the following. First of all, Prosper Portland had done quite a bit of community outreach many years before. So in 2001, 2002, there was a lot of community engagement. And so when the opportunity to bring Trader Joe's to this site came, there was a feeling amongst staff and leadership, myself included, that this would be great because in 2001 and 2002, this is what people wanted. And even more recent than that had been an example of something that people were really excited about. So I think there was just this assumption of this seems like a good thing. I think the second thing was that, and obviously that wasn't necessarily the case, but the second thing was, back to that transparency, we were basically asked not to share the news until until a decision was going to be made. I believe that had we gone out in a more, in an earlier way to community partners, particularly within African American leaders, and said, this is who's potentially coming. What do you think about it? What would the community benefits that you would like to see? Let's have a conversation about this. I think that the conversation might have gone very differently. And then, not to shift the blame too much, but I don't believe that we were well served by the media in this. In an environment in which the more clicks that you can get and the more outrageous your story becomes, a focus on reporting and really investigating what the actual nuanced truth is has become less and less important. And so in conversations that I've had with people who were within PALF, for example, I think that we recognize that the media made this incredibly sensational and sensationalized it in a way that that was really painful all around.
Let's now go to the audience for some questions. If you've written a question on an index card, hold it high for staff to collect. You can also submit questions through Twitter using the hashtag FridayForum. I'll try and read at least one index card question and at least one from Twitter. We invite City Club members to ask their questions at the microphone. Asking questions at the Friday Forum microphone is a benefit of City Club membership, and membership is open to everyone. Please identify yourself as a City Club member and ask one question in 30 seconds or less. One question.
Thank you. Anthony Petchel, City Club member. I work for a nonprofit affordable housing developer, Reach Community Development, so thank you for your commitment to housing. My question is around how can Prosper Portland and your other government agencies that you work with move quicker. In a lot of ways, we're addressing a housing crisis, and a lot of our tools and natural solutions take years to implement. So maybe you can address how you can move the organization a little bit faster.
So great question. So, you know, I do think that there is a healthy tension between moving quickly and making sure that you have sufficient community support and community input before you move. But once you have that input, I agree that we need to do whatever we can to expedite processes and to kind of get out of our own way. I would say just practically piloting programs, acknowledging that you might not do something forever, and just trying it out is probably the best way to go. That's been a success for us. The process of creating a new program, getting it through city council or getting it through our board can sometimes take longer. Oftentimes, if you're piloting something, you can move more quickly. But I also think that the mayor and a number of the city commissioners have been going through a pretty thorough process of looking at how our administrative policies cannot be in conflict with one another, so that you have, for example, the Bureau of Development Services really supporting affordable housing. And so I think that those are important steps that we take.
Mary Vogel, City Club member. When African-American developer Tony Pickett from the Urban Land Conservancy of Denver was here first speaking at the Q Center on the African-American background of the community land trust movement, and then at Metro on the potential of the community land trust to capture value for the entire community while also keeping housing and small business areas affordable without displacement and all. Several communities around the country are doing this now. He's involved in both Denver and in Atlanta. And I just wondered, has PDC put any thought into either partnering with our present community land trust or helping a regional community land trust perhaps grow to the scale that could really help out on this as an anti-displacement strategy, the community land trust as an anti-displacement strategy?
So our local community land trust, Proud Ground, is doing important work to that end, and the Portland Housing Bureau has been partnering with them, and I know that that's an important partnership, and that the community land trust model is something that they're supporting as part of the home ownership objectives that they have and that we collectively share. Within the commercial space, which is where we focus within Prosper Portland, one of the things that we've been really heartened by is the work of our 42nd, which is one of the Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative districts. So they have recently purchased a couple retail spaces, and those spaces are effectively community owned and will continue to be spaces where people can have more affordable rents, where they will not necessarily have ownership, but they will have access. Thinking about a community land trust model within a commercial space is something we're really interested in. And so, we would love to potentially see how that might work at the ODOT blocks in the Central East Side. But I'm not familiar with anybody nationally who's done a community land trust in a commercial space. And so, that's something that we would like to pilot and would like to look at. Thank you.
Wynn Wakala, City Club member. I've been on the CCI for Washington County, which is Committee for Citizen Involvement, and it's always been frustrating that planning people create the plans and then ask for our input. What are you doing? Can you talk more about getting citizen involvement first before you start creating plans?
Absolutely. So I'm thinking about the Broadway corridor area, which is right here in the central city because that's the place that we're creating a plan right now. But we are starting with an open question about what is our vision, what are our guiding principles, and then the plan will be developed only after significant public engagement. So that's definitely how we like to operate. I can't think of examples where we create a plan and then ask for input. It might be a more iterative process. And one of the challenges that I have seen is that, staff and colleagues will try to get input early on. And there are some people who are interested in sort of the storming phase of, come give your perspective, talk about your values. But oftentimes you will get more interest and more community engagement once there is a proposal. And because there's usually something that people like about it or they don't like about it, it's just a little stickier by the time you have a draft plan. And so, thinking about how you engage people in those early days and then keep them engaged is really, is a big question. It's something we're trying to work on, but would love to, work with you and understand what you think best practices are.
Bill Dickey, City Club member. Can you give us a quick rundown on what is going on with the U.S. Postal Service facility on Hoyt and 9th or 10th Broadway?
Absolutely. So right now the post office is continuing to operate and will continue to operate until their new facility out by the airport is complete, so probably in the middle of 2018. We are going to make sure to continue to have a access point for Postal Service. For some people, that is their neighborhood location, so P.O. boxes, et cetera, that's important. And so within a quarter-mile radius, there will continue to be post office service within that area. But we are going through a public engagement process right now in order to get input. We will hopefully have a development partner selected in early to mid 2018, and then we will be working with them to develop a master plan and a development plan. We anticipate that there will be a couple thousand jobs and a couple thousand residents, so we're talking about a real development of scale, and we want to make it as an inclusive process as possible, so we're taking time now to get community input for that.
I'm going to do one question from one of the cards here. We've got Andrew Kollek on Twitter. You mentioned the importance of increasing development. How do you convince skeptical neighborhoods of this need?
Such a good question. Well, I guess there's a part of me that feels like, we're in the city of Portland, I believe that there are a lot of values that are shared. I believe that people really want to have a city that is diverse, that is accessible, that maintains what we love about Portland in terms of the fact that it is, that it has had a lot of middle-class neighborhoods and, hasn't been New York, hasn't been San Francisco. I think we need to help people understand the relationship between their actions and the overall picture. So if you are a citizen activist saying we don't want additional density along the commercial corridor, that has a direct impact in terms of people's ability to afford to live in Portland. And I think that education process is half the equation. I believe that we need to have those kinds of honest conversations. When we did polling as part of our communications work, affordable housing was the most important issue that came up, by far. So I think we need to have the conversation, and I think City Council is, but we need to have the conversation with folks that if affordable housing is very important, then in each of our neighborhoods we need to kind of breathe into what is it going to look like to live in a city that, the city of 2035, where there will be more gentle density, where there will be more, fourplexes and duplexes, and where it will look a bit more like Northwest and the Alphabet District in certain parts of our city. I'm optimistic that those kinds of conversations make a difference.
Ted Kay, City Club member. I'd like to start my 30 seconds by asking the room to salute Courtney Nelson for her outgoing presidency this year. I'd like to ask, how does PDC measure its success? How do you measure what you're managing?
Great question. So when we adopted the new strategic plan, had a number of key indicators. So things like measuring job growth, measuring who benefits from our investments, measuring leverage. We have a number of different ways, but we're actually in the process of retooling how we do that. And so, more to come on that. Those are evolving indicators. But if you go to our website, you can see a number of the ways that we track the outcomes and the impact.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Anthony. I'm a City Club member, and I'm also on the Portland School Board. Earlier, Mr. Green referred to public spaces for civic good. What is Prosper Portland able to do to ensure that the new neighborhoods, the new density that you're bringing in, also includes spaces for our children, including public schools? Thank you.
So not to get too technical on this one, but we do have, because of there are statutory prohibitions against using tax increment finance for schools. So we can't make direct investments in schools. We can, however, invest in parks, we can invest in daycares, we can invest in in places that children want to be. We can invest in family-friendly amenities, and we definitely do that. So I think our role is to really, support community facilities, to support the kinds of family-friendly amenities that are out there, and to make sure that we have close partnerships with our local school districts to think about where those can be complementary. So, for example, within New Columbia, we helped support the Boys and Girls Club. I think that's a great example of how we can jointly achieve our objectives.
Kurt Rebranding, member. You have stated that the affordable housing is one of the primary problems of the city, and that you do recognize it. There are many opportunities to increase affordable housing, and one of them is inclusionary zoning, and also more mixed-use kind of developments. Can you tell us where your agency is on these issues?
Absolutely. So when I'm going to go back to the Lentz examples. So when we put out the request for proposals for the properties that Prosper Portland owns in Lentz, and actually this is true for Gateway as well. We own a property on 106th and Halsey. We did so in concert with the Portland Housing Bureau, which is the agency that's charged with delivering affordable housing for the city. And so what we did in that partnership was to really think about how Prosper Portland could augment the investment above even what the Portland Housing Bureau is doing, and they are making significant investments in 3 of the 4 projects in Lentz Town Center. And so what we did in these areas was to make investments just above the 60% median family income. So Portland Housing Bureau has 45% of the resources that come out of urban renewal areas. They use those to invest in 0 to 60% median family income. We have in the Lentz projects augmented so that there are also spaces for people who are between 60% and 100% of median family income. Again, acknowledging that over the long term, having places that are for more of a quote-unquote workforce housing portion will continue to be important. And we're doing the same thing at the project on 106th in Gateway.
Unfortunately, we are out of broadcast time. We'll have to stop the question portion of our program today. If the program has inspired you to donate or join City Club, you can do so at the registration as you leave the room. I'm Courtney Nelson, President of City Club of Portland. Thank you for being here today. A special thanks to Colin Jones of the Friday Forum Committee. Please join me in thanking Stephen Green and Kimberly Branam for being here today. We're adjourned.